Spending cuts at the federal government gain headlines. There has been growing talk about budget reductions for the city of Wilmington, particularly when it comes to the city's fire and police departments. WECT's Ariana Bertolotti took a closer look into what's going on here. Ariana, is the city looking at reducing those budgets?
Well, according to Wilmington City Manager Tony Caudle, there are no proposed cuts at this time. This whole announcement came as part of an exercise to reassess the city's efficiency in spending. Of course, if you are one of our city's essential workers, seeing this could be cause for concern. Alarm bells were sounded upon reading an email from the city manager saying there is a preliminary shortfall of $6 million in the general fund budget. So the city looked into which departments could cut back on their expenses. Upon hearing this, the Firefighters Association expressed their fears on social media, saying budget cuts shouldn't be targeted at the people who keep us safe.
So until anything's finalized, everything's up in the air and nobody's going to be satisfied until we know for sure.
City Manager Tony Caudle has heard the uproar on social media and is trying to bring some calm to the situation. He responded in part, quote, "Every year, the city evaluates its delivery of services to determine what can be done or more efficiently. This year, we are following that very same process. There are no proposed cuts to any services at this time." Caudle says this is an exercise the city goes through every year when working on a new budget, and the city employees shouldn't be worried. Ariana Bertolotti, WECT News.